You can follow our agenda and access today's supplemental materials in the digitized session booklet shared in advance by email, as well as through a link that my colleague has just placed or will be placing in the chat feature. And before we get started, I'd like to go ahead and share some housekeeping instructions and review our code of conduct for today's session. First, if you haven't done so already, we would like you to add your name and pronouns to your profile. You can do this by clicking on the participants icon at the bottom of the window, find and hover over your name in the participants list on the right side of the Zoom window, and click More, then rename from the options provided. We want you to be aware that this session is being recorded and will be shared after the session concludes. Participating with your camera on, you have consented to being recorded. If you do not consent to being recorded, you can turn off your camera, and obviously you would not share during the verbal aspects of today's program. You can, though, continue to share through the chat feature, which will not be shared or saved. Breakout sessions, if we were to have them, also would not be recorded, but I don't think we're using any breakout sessions today. Okay, and now for the code of conduct. Our events are intended to create a space that nurtures a community of educators that is inclusive of all, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender identity, religion, age, orientation, ability, or stage of professional development. All attendees are expected to show respect to presenters, organizers, and other attendees. This event will contain discussion about issues related to race, bias, and oppression that can be difficult to talk about. As an attendee, you may at times feel uncomfortable with the issues and opinions being shared. If you find yourself struggling with a topic of discussion, it is appropriate to walk away from your computer, take a break. It is not appropriate to respond by sharing hateful ideologies, racist language, or confrontational viewpoints. Hateful and racist behavior will be considered a violation of the code of conduct and result in immediate expulsion from the event. So we ask that you actively listen, that you be sensitive to the anxieties and concerns of your fellow participants, and show support to one another. Again, please reach out if you need help and use the chat feature if you have a technology issue, want to clarify something, or have concerns about another participant's behavior. You can also privately message staff through the chat feature if your concern is sensitive. You can find us by looking for the word co-host beside our names in the participants list. All right, now to get on to the exciting part of the program. I would like to introduce today's speakers and the authors of the Muslim in Brooklyn curriculum, Dr. Habiba Noor and Alex Tronolone. Dr. Habiba Noor is an interdisciplinary scholar, I'll bring you to her name, whose work lies at the intersection of media studies, religious studies, and education. She received her PhD in Media and Cultural Studies from the Institute of Education in London. Her dissertation focused on Muslim youth and their relationship to news of the War on Terror. Here she used an arts-based research method asking young Muslims from diverse ethnic, class, and backgrounds to make news of the war. Prior to this, Habiba worked as a public middle school in Oakland, California, and here in New York City, with extensive experience in curriculum development in K-12 and higher education. In addition to writing the curriculum for the Muslims in Brooklyn Oral History Project, she is co-author of the documentary theater play, To Be Honest, Voices on Islam and in an American City, which draws on extensive interviews during the 2016 presidential campaign. She also has been engaged in research, writing, and activism around Islam and Islamophobia at the legislative and local levels in Texas. Habiba is an instructor in the Department of Education in Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas, where she teaches courses on social justice and urban education. Alex is a lifelong New Yorker and a proud New York City public school graduate. He received his bachelor's degree in history from NYU and his master's in teaching urban adolescents with disabilities from Long Island University as a New York City teaching fellow. His professional focus is on designing programs to help educators understand how the humanities can be used to examine our civic past in order to better map our civic future. Alex currently serves on the steering committee of the Museums, Arts, and Culture Access Consortium, and organizations striving toward increasing access to New York City's cultural institutions for the disability community through connection, education, and advocacy. Previously, he served on the board of the New York City Museum Educators Roundtable, a forum for museum education professionals to address meaningful issues and exchange and disseminate best practices within the sector. And now on that note, I'm going to quit talking and I'd like to formally hand things over to Alex. We can take it from here, Alex.
My pleasure. Hello, everyone. I'm Alex, and I helped write this curriculum, and I'm so proud of it, and I'm very happy that you are all here to share it. Hi. And so to start, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the project as a whole. I was previously at Brooklyn Historical Society, where the Muslims in Brooklyn project existed over 3 years. So over 3 years, from 2017 to about this year, Brooklyn Historical Society collected over 50 oral histories. Oh, hi, Deborah. 50 oral histories from Muslims in Brooklyn. The purpose of the project was built on 3 premises. Muslims in Brooklyn have a long history. They've been here for as long as there's been European non-Indigenous folks here. There have been Muslims here. 2, Muslims are a diverse people. That what it means to be Muslim, what it means to is made up of many ethnicities, cultures, and nationalities. And 3rd, Muslims in Brooklyn are Brooklynites. They've both shaped and been shaped by life in Brooklyn. And the collection of oral histories is just really incredible. We'll share in a moment the oral history portal that contains the full oral histories. Over 50 interviews, each interview over 2 hours long. And so what the job of myself and my team and Habiba was to take these 2-hour oral histories and find ways to make them usable in a K through 12 classroom, where you do not have 2 hours to listen to a full oral history and discuss it. And so what Habiba, myself, my colleague Zahir, Ali, who is the project director, did was we took these clips and we've created this modular thematic curriculum that we think can be implemented in a variety of classrooms in a variety of settings. My background is as a special educator, and so as designing, I was thinking of how do we make this accessible, differentiatable. I just wanted to see what the captioner did with differentiatable for teachers and make it usable. And so today we're going to start with kind of our how would you say it, Habiba? Like it's our template lesson. It's the lesson that introduced both the curriculum as a whole. It introduces oral history, the uses of it and how it can be used. And then it specifically introduces the Muslims in Brooklyn curriculum. That's pretty good, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so we are going to get to do a lot of stuff today. I'm really excited. But I'm going to hand it over to Habiba, who's going to talk a little bit more about the kind of intellectual thrust of the project and about how and why we use oral histories, what their uses are, and how you might think about those in a classroom, and how that connects to culturally relevant teaching. Are you going to do that,
Yes.
Habiba? Is that right?
Yes, I am. Thank
Wonderful.
you. Oh, wait, am I unmuted?
No, you're good. I can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. Welcome, everybody, and thanks so much for coming. I want to start by addressing the title of our session, which is one of the titles, which is Culturally Relevant Pedagogy in the Virtual Classroom, and before using oral histories. Right? So what we're doing in this curriculum and in this workshop is we're bringing a few different approaches to classroom learning together, which is the use of oral histories in the teaching of the humanities, or engaging young audiences or even teacher audiences in oral history and also culturally relevant pedagogy. And I just want to start by saying that this term has become increasingly popular. It was coined by Gloria Ladson-Billings, who was from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, former president of the American Educational Research Association. It was a term that was coined in 1994, but it's gained some increasing currency. And so I just want to take us back to think about, what do we mean by culturally relevant pedagogy? Culturally relevant pedagogy is a philosophical approach to learning that centralizes authenticity. And it takes the position that culture is central to true learning. Your own culture, other people's culture, and that knowledge is actually situated and emerges through cultural perspectives. We can move on to the next slide. So some central pillars of culturally relevant pedagogy. Culturally relevant pedagogy is often thought of as, I think it's often misconstrued as sort of bringing culture into the classroom. And actually at its core, culturally relevant pedagogy is not that. Its foundation are three pillars, which is academic achievement. That's central, which is that, the project of teaching and learning centralizes the experience of learning, right? Which is academic at its core. And that is a central aspect of culturally relevant pedagogy. It's not just, it's not just about sort of celebrations or cultures, but you have to always bring that back into this broader project of schooling, of pedagogy, of learning. Also, that culturally relevant pedagogy centralizes this notion of cultural competence, right? That we are, that schooling, learning, teaching is a fundamentally human experience, and that knowledge has roots in the human experience. And from that standpoint, the cultural competence needs to be centralized for both teachers and students. So I think that, even just, the project of teachers having more sort of understanding of student populations is a central aspect of culturally relevant pedagogy. And I think that this particular workshop can do that. So, you may or may not use this with your students, but I think that going through this lesson, going through this website and this workshop, it kind of gives a perspective of the worlds from which many of the Muslim students in New York are emerging. And not just in New York, actually, sort of any Muslim students, and even in many cases non-Muslim students. But it's an authentic, sort of grounded cultural engagement in this website. So, and another central pillar is sort of socio-political consciousness, that students and teachers exist in these worlds of sort of constant political, social change, and to make that a central aspect of the classroom. And the framework that's often used in teaching of literature is that we're constantly looking for both windows into the world and mirrors where we see reflections of ourselves. And I think that we use literature, right, in this way to think about mirrors and windows, right? We want to be able to see the other world, but we also want to see ourselves. Culturally relevant pedagogy is both of these things, right? Cultural competency is not just competency in your own culture, it's in your own culture and other cultures as well. And so from that standpoint, I want to just take a turn to oral history. And oral history, I think the most common way we think about oral history in the classroom, and the way it's often been used, is we have oral history projects where students might be asked to go and interview somebody, right? Where the students are asked to take on the role of oral historian. In upper level courses, you might use oral histories as sort of primary texts for analysis, right? So oral history has a few places in the curriculum. Some of you may or may not have much experience with it. But the primary audience for oral history and the work of oral historians tends to be scholars, right? This project, the Oral History in Brooklyn project, emerged from Zahir Ali. He was project director, and he launched the project. And the goal was to fill in gaps in the archive. The archive, which is used to create historical knowledge, right? So the primary audience for oral histories, which tend to be long, are historians, and sometimes researchers of other kinds, like novelists or sociologists. But you know, each oral history is quite long. But we take the position in our curriculum that each oral history has, you know, when we can sort of edit it down and make clips, that they really have a lot of value in and of themselves, just for students, for the public. So what we've done is we've taken this big sort of scholarly project and make it very consumable for various audiences, with the eye towards the young audience in school. And so a few things about oral history. Right, so here we have, you know, Zahir Ali, who was the project director, and we have Liz Strong, who was another oral historian for the project. And we have a picture of her interviewing some of the folks that that are included in the oral history project. And, you know, one thing that I think is really interesting when we think about oral histories is that, well, Zahir once said to me, and I thought it really, I think it really stands out. He says that not everyone is a storyteller, but everyone has a story to tell. And so oral histories are, the way oral historians see it is that there's a co-authorship of oral history, where the interviewer and the interviewee are both authors of these stories. So what we are centralizing in this experience and sort of thinking about oral history as material for the classroom is that they create opportunities to engage in deep listening, right? And this is what we are kind of orienting our audience towards, is sort of how do we listen? And, you know, this is not just like these little stories that we are going to hear, they're layered. The difference between oral history and journalism is that oral history situates itself in relation to other forces, other political forces, other cultural forces. And so it is a part of a bigger story. So these clips, yes, while they're telling unique stories, we can also expand and extend them to other folks in the community. Some other points, so about the curriculum, and we are going to listen. What we are going to do is we're going to do sort of an introductory lesson to the curriculum that we developed around this project. And I want to just say a few things, that the Muslims in Brooklyn project and the curriculum project is not a primer on Islam. We take the position that there's, you know, many sort of resources that can offer an Islam 101. But what we are doing here is we are sort of, we are centralizing various stories that emerge from Brooklyn, from New York, that come from Muslims. And these stories are diverse. And if you're looking for a sort of Islam 101, this is not necessarily the place. But what we have here is we have the sort of diverse lived experiences of people who identify as Muslim in New York City. And in many ways, it reflects the sort of the broader diversity of New York City, of Brooklyn itself. All right, with that, we're gonna go towards the first, this lesson that sort of orients the students and you all to this project of listening. And I would just like to say, if there are any questions that anybody has sort of about the broader oral history project, that to please just, you know, throw them in the chat and we'll collect the questions and respond to them. later, but if questions are coming to mind, I encourage you to just put them in the chat. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, you all are going to be students now, and we're going to run through one of our first lessons. So, and this lesson, like I said, is to train us as listeners and to think about the sort of the value of oral history, right? Of listening to oral histories. So we're going to start by giving you what like a typical high school student might be given when they're given oral histories, because actually I think in upper level high school classes, people are given oral histories as transcripts, and often historians are given oral histories as transcripts. So we're going to start in the sort of classic mode of oral history, which is transcript. So Alex is going to share a transcript. I think we're going to have it on the chat, and we're going to have it on screen. The first thing I would like for you to do is to read this transcript. Alex, did you want to make any? Did you have any points to say? No?
I just reminded, it's just so cool. I'm just excited. Put a PDF link in the chat that you can copy into your web browser so that you can get the PDF that I am currently sharing on your machine. It may be a little challenging to read this transcript on the screen sharing.
So everybody should have a transcript of an oral history, which is a clip from one of the 50 oral histories that we've taken. Listening time, it takes about 2 minutes to hear, but reading generally should take a little bit less. No link yet. There's no link in the chat yet. So you probably will have an easier time. You can scroll, go to this link. Okay, we have a link up there. And we are not giving you the name. Although you see the name. Ooh, wait. Okay, scroll to the bottom of the link. And you should have a PDF. View transcript PDF. And it's called First Impressions. And just take a 1 minute, I'd say like 1.5 minutes, to read it quietly to yourself. Okay, and if you can resist, please don't read the bio. Our goal here in the classroom, we want to just give the text without any information. That's our goal.
So don't read ahead.
Yeah, don't read ahead.
Take your time.
Take your time. Sorry, I'll give you a few more seconds to read. Okay, now I'm going to ask for some participation. We have, can I ask for a volunteer in the group? And you can raise hand, and then we will, are we still quiet?
Can we give just 1 more second, and then we'll just take reactions before we read out loud.
Okay.
Yeah, and when you finished reading, you can, we're not a big group, so you can unmute yourself if you like. Alternatively, we'd love to have you drop in the chat just an initial reaction, something that stood out to you, something that resonated with you, maybe you identified with it, something from your own past, just anything that struck you.
Falling in love with the city and making it home. I identify with the narrator's, thank you, Tess, for that. Rena, I identify with the narrator's perspective, and I moved to NYC in 2009. I still have pride from Georgia, made me laugh. Oh, Caitlin, I still feel this way a little when I leave JFK. Denise, yes, I first came to Brooklyn in the 80s, relocated and came back with a deeper sense of appreciation for the city, so I identify with what he shared. Susan, I had some similar thoughts when I moved to New York City for school from Indiana.
And Martina, did you want to unmute and share out loud?
Sure. Hey.
Hi.
My father's family, I was born in Holland, and my father's family still lives there. And if they ever come visit us, that trip from JFK it's every time is the same. It's like, people can't believe how far away the airport is. Why isn't there a train? Like, it's like, there's a whole thing. But then when you see, you know, the Manhattan skyline, it is sort of like breathtaking, and all of their bad impression of how difficult it was to get their luggage, etc. It sort of knocks you off your feet. So yeah, I relate to what the narrator is describing.
Thank you, Martina. Thank you for sharing, and thank you to everyone who shared in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. And also, I think I know these are great. I think also just to throw out there, like, are there any clues about who this person is and where they're from the text? Just keep that in your head. And while you're thinking that, let's read. I'd like to have a volunteer.
I'm interested, Habiba, can we give people a second to think, like, who do they think this is and what? Because I see Rena just put, based on that question, that it's a male perspective. I guess there are some clues in here to that. I'm curious if other people have thoughts of, like, who this might be. You know, who is this narrator? Rena says it's a male perspective. And Rena, I'm supposing that you're assuming when the narrator says, I met my wife, I have my kids, implying.
Also, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to elaborate. So yes, the keywords and assuming I'm just thinking back to the 80s. So I'm just getting in that mindset of not knowing this person's or the narrator's pronouns. But yes, keywords like wife and kids. But I know my parents immigrated to the States in the late 70s. So I can imagine it's an immigrant, and even in one of my parents, their port of entry was New York. And so is, and I say in the 70s, like Saturday Night Fever, like all that you see, the Brooklyn Bridge. So it's just like, you know, very shiny eyed. And then it's like, oh, right, it's grim and gray and burned down houses.
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity, like, to think, like, as a way of, you know, having students think about, you know, text and some claims and evidence based on what the text is about who they think this is. But this is a part of a buildup, right? So we're gonna move forward with the buildup. But I like these comments, you know, the evidence older because of referencing East New York and the Twin Towers. The vernacular sounds male. There's maybe someone who came in as an adult saying they didn't necessarily have the expectation that New York City would become home. Um,
Hmm.
I like, and then there's this assumption, this feeling that this is a male and this is a Muslim, and I would kind of, I wonder if there's anything in the text that kind of suggests the Muslim, other than the fact this is Muslims in Brooklyn curriculum. But what really stands out is that this is an incredibly relatable narrative. Right? I want to move forward and ask if we can get a volunteer, and we're going to have a couple people do this, to do a reading of this. So here we have a relationship with this text. We've read it silently to ourselves. I would like for someone to do a reading kind of interpretation of this text.
I'll go first to break the ice.
Okay.
And then hopefully someone else will be brave and unmute and follow me.
Okay.
And I'm just gonna read a section. I'm gonna read this this last section here. I'm gonna wait for the helicopter to pass over here. Wow, I guess I love Brooklyn. Yeah, I mean I look at it like really more than home. This is where I met my wife. This is where I have my kids. This is where I live most of my life. I think Brooklyn is home for me. And I think it's going to continue to be home even when I retire. Brooklyn is part of us as we are part of it. And I wish for the best for Brooklyn. That's how I see it. See.
Okay. I'd like to get another volunteer to read that same section. And our goal here is to, you know, offer another sort of oral interpretation of the text. Can I get a volunteer?
Like
Hi, my name's Susan. I'll read it. Susan.
Okay, great.
Okay. Same section. Wow. I guess I love Brooklyn. Yeah, I mean, this is, I mean, I look at it like really more than home. This is where I met my wife. This is where I have my kids. This is where I've lived most of my life. I think Brooklyn is home for me. And I think it's going to continue to be home even when I retire. Brooklyn is part of us as we are part of it. And I wish the best for Brooklyn. That's how I see it.
That was awesome, Susan. Thank you so much.
We're scrapping the rest of the lesson. The rest of this is just improv class. Just
Can I get another volunteer? Another volunteer. Think about how can we maybe read it differently.
be like an improv class. Like, can I get someone to do it in angry voice or a sarcastic voice?
Or even let's just, we could just do that first sentence. Starting from, wow, I guess I love Brooklyn. Is there another way you can say that?
I'll come off mute.
Awesome. Thank you, Rena.
Just to keep it moving. I know what it is to be tripping crickets. Wow. I guess I love Brooklyn. Yeah. I mean, look at it. Like really more than home. This is where I met my wife. I didn't know if you want me to continue or, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was dramatic pause. I like that. But, you know, we can, again, this is an exercise where we can take a text and build some, yeah, thank you so much, Rena. We can build some different interpretations into it through the way it's read. All of this, oh, Alex, you were gonna say something?
I was just gonna ask people to, you know, how did, or, you know, did, and then how did hearing the transcript aloud, how is that a different experience than reading it for yourself? You just reflect on that experience. Did you hear something different when it was read out loud versus when it was in your head?
Refreshing to hear different voices. Thank you, Rena. Reading aloud versus silently. Any other ideas about?
I like the drama of it. the pauses. It
Yeah.
it makes me think about how the author felt a
Yeah.
little bit different. Because I could think of it sarcastically, like, wow, I guess I love Brooklyn. Yeah, I'm with
Absolutely.
versus, in a little bit more dry way. So it was really refreshing to hear the different perspective, the different reading.
Yeah. I like the also Susan says, I love hearing someone else read, always brings out things I miss when reading silently. Spoken adds another layer, makes the emotion more clear. I agree with Carrie, the pauses make me feel like the author is maybe realizing these things for the first time. Great.
I just also like big props to everyone for volunteering and being active in the chat. Thank you all.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Thanks. And I think that is that Carrie that said that this is another interpretation. And I think that what is key here is that, there are different modes of interpretation. And the spoken, the oral is a mode of interpretation, right? We can interpret through the way we're going to read. Now we are going to listen to the original clip, sort of the source of these texts, of this text. So Alex is going to pull us, we're going to get to listen to the actual audio.
Yeah, so we're gonna hope that Zoom here cooperates. Okay, so I'll play the clip. The clip is 2.5 minutes long. You can follow along. This will auto scroll. So if you like to read along, or you can just listen. Here we go.
When I first got to Brooklyn, obviously we had to drive from JFK through East New York. And back in the 80s, East New York was not what it looks like now. So in my head, I'm imagining the beautiful city, New York, the Statue of Liberty, and we greet you as soon as you get to the airport. So we drove through East New York, and I seen burned down houses, and I was saying to my family, "What? This is New York? Are you kidding me? This is not what I'm thinking." They said, "Yeah, well, you get to see it." So we drove through Atlantic Avenue, Eastern Parkway, and eventually got downtown Brooklyn, and I was able to see the Twin Towers. I was like, "Oh wow, this is what I came for." So that same day, believe it or not, I walked to the promenade just down here just to see that view, and it was an amazing sight. I took some pictures too, just to prove it. To be honest with you, I think Brooklyn is home for me in a lot of ways. And when I think back, I don't know why I'm choking. I know why. I think when I first came here, even though it was strange and started new, I felt this was home. And I used to think, I'm going to be working here for a couple of years, get my education, make my money, then leave. But then didn't take too long to realize this is home. This is what I changed my life to better. Wow. I guess I love Brooklyn. Yeah, I look at it like really more than home. This is where I met my wife. This is where I had my kids. This is what I lived most of my life. I think Brooklyn is home for me, and I think it's going to continue to be home even when I retire. Brooklyn is part of us, as we are part of it, and I wish the best for Brooklyn. That's how I see it.
Yeah, just
I'm not crying. You're
for a bit, and to give your impressions. That was moving, made you choke up. Any other impressions from hearing it? Shows the deep, heartfelt emotion. Didn't expect that emotion. Authentic, yeah.
There was a genuine connection and love there that changed. Just I connected with the article when I first read it, but just hearing it gave me a different level of appreciation for the author and the author's experience and growth and just that love. It really gave me a completely different view.
Yeah, thanks for that, Carrie. Something that John says, spoken adds another layer and it makes the emotion more clear, right? Because before, the emotions are just things we're interpreting beforehand. Yeah, this moving, heartfelt emotion, introspective. That speaks very deeply from my experience of living in NYC during 9/11, a voice that needed to be heard then and is good to hear now. Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, these are great. Thank you for all of your comments.
And I guess, you know, the bigger thing is, you know, like to think about it from the role of, oh, that's interesting, Deborah, sorry. It replaces any stereotypes you might have formed from the text with the real person's voice. And this actually is great softball, Deborah, because it leads into my question, which is, how is reading it different from hearing someone else read it to hearing it in the author's voice? And when you think about how, when you share it with students, what might be the kind of learnings that you'd like them to take away from that experience?
Deeply felt emotion is invisible in the written text, right? I mean, that's what we have. We, as teachers of literacy and reading, our goal is to have them really do some interpretation silently around the text, and that's what a good reader can do. But it's just not the same, right? When you can actually hear it out loud from the person themselves.
I think about what it means to teach history, and when you read love letters, or you read letters from soldiers home, or even you read a transcript of a speech that someone gave. You know, you read Martin Luther King Jr.'s, you know, I Have a Dream speech, but it's very different to listen, right? And there's so much that is revealed in the orality of it. And that's something that we wanted to put forward, that in the value of oral history is in its orality and what can be learned from listening to the orality. Let me see here what's happening in the chat.
The mix of accents and the way he speaks, English and mostly significant, audible to me. The Brooklyn accent, right? We can hear the Brooklyn in him, right? As this person that has migrated to Brooklyn, it does not appear in the written text. Audio also makes clear that this is a moment of realization for the speaker, that we are hearing him come to an understanding in real time in a way. Yeah, intonation and emotion and speech helps. Yes, the ELL and SWD better understand if they're struggling with language. I feel many immigrants or children of immigrants could empathize with his voice. And I think that what we're doing here is, again, you know, this is not sort of an intro to Muslim migration to New York. This is a story about migration that includes a person who is Muslim. And we still don't know anything about the narrator here.
Is that the last thing we're sharing? Habiba?
I think for my students, I'd completely remove all the connections to Muslim. Yes, and have them break out in small groups and discuss and then share with the whole group, much like we did, so that they can hear and feel the entire experience. Yes, exactly. I mean, it's not essential to start with the Muslim experience. This lesson is really sort of a model. You can do many, many different things with this lesson. I mean, even just as a purely from the standpoint of just literacy and thinking about orality, developing listening skills, thinking about how history is constructed and how often there are pieces missing in the construction of history. There are many different things that you can do with this lesson. But what this is doing, this lesson is an introduction to the bigger experience of then going on and listening to many different oral histories to think about the sort of value of the orality. Let's do a little bit of background on the speaker. Alex, can you pull up his picture?
So I'm sharing, I don't know if I can share both at the same time, but here's
Okay.
the bio. So just because when you read the bio, there's stuff in there that you can reflect on again. If you went back and re-listened, I think there's stuff that people have found out. Like, if no one figures it out, I'll share. Someone pointed it out at an earlier teacher workshop that we did that I was like, wow, that's wild.
The bio.
Yeah, like when you read the bio, like we shared it at a previous teacher workshop, and someone was like, oh, like he was here, when you re-listen to it, the audio, like he kind of chokes up when he mentions the Twin Towers. And then once you read the bio, it gives you like a little bit more like, oh, and then when and then I've listened to the oral history again, and I've heard it, and I've heard new things. And it's, I thought that was just a really incredible noticing that someone had shared. All right, let me share his photo here.
Just as a side point, that I think that there are many ways into these oral histories, and in this example, it's a slow reveal, right, to kind of emphasize the orality. But of course, people can find people that they're interested in listening to and then go from the picture or to the bio to the oral history. But here's a picture of our narrator, Ahmed Nasser, who, there is a much longer oral history of his, which is over an hour on the oral history portal, and other little clips on the website if somebody was interested in going deeper into his life or into the context that he emerges from, right? And of course, this is just level one. This oral history, it's what is it? Does it say it's an hour. We have the whole story of Ahmed Nasser, but this is our way in. Some students might want to then go and listen to all about him, perhaps connect to do some research on the Muslim police officers around 9/11, because he goes into that, and then there's been media around that. So you can also do the sort of work of the historian, which is then to contextualize this particular man in relation to the broader social cultural phenomenon. But of course, you can do many different things with it. These are just small tools that you can then extend in many different ways, but it's a starting point. I think we're ready to continue and think about other ways to engage with the sort of authentic words of the narrators. And I just want to again comment on this idea of listening as a creative act. I think that another way of thinking of it is listening as an interpretive act, right? And that as listeners, we are constantly sort of creating meanings and new meanings around these texts and around the oral history. And so we're going to take this level of creativity to another place, and Alex is going to sort of transition us to another activity that we have designed around these, around things to do with the transcript. So I will turn it over to Alex in that activity.
Thank you, Habiba. Yeah, that's I get to do the fun stuff with you, right? Like, well, not that wasn't fun, but now we get to do the creative part. And when we talked about listening as a creative act, right? Habiba had mentioned, it's the narrator and the interviewer co-create this oral history, right? Like a different interviewer would have created a different oral history. And then when we listen to it, we hear what we bring to that is our own layer of interpretation, our own layer of creativity. And so what we wanted to do was, so now that you've done this, you know, I think the hard part for the teacher is, of course, like, so what? Like, what do you do now? So what we're going to do is we are going to create blackout poems. Some of you may be familiar with this, some of you may not. I am currently teaching in a high school English classroom virtually. And so this is possible to do virtually, but like all things virtually, it takes like 10 extra steps. And so we're going to create blackout poems. To do that, we are going to need a blackout poetry maker, which is conveniently there. And I'm going to walk everyone through these steps, but it's going to be there are a lot of steps. So I'd like everyone to visit blackoutpoetry.glitch.me, and I'll share my screen.
Election. Excited to be back. I love the energy here more than anything else I've experienced.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen, y'all. So everyone's on the blackout poetry page, yeah? This is me online teacher. Everyone here? Can I get a thumbs up? Can I get a thank you? Yeah, great, okay. Then you're going to need the text of the transcript with no spaces, which Charlie will supply to you. I should see lots more people joining in this Google Doc here. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna copy and then paste into the custom text field, and then you'll hit enter text. And you're gonna copy this text, go over to the blackout poetry maker, and in the custom text field here on the left, paste the text, then click enter text. Habiba, if you're talking, you're muted.
I was saying, can we get a thumbs up if you've been able to do that successfully?
This is like making me, you know, like this is what my life is going to be like on Friday when I teach all virtual. And it just, are you there? Did you do it? Is it happening? Okay.
Copy the text and put it into the blackout poetry maker. Got it.
Once it's there, this is where we've asked students, you know, in a classroom, this is super easy. You give them the transcript, you give them black markers, and you let them go at it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to give you a moment to create your own blackout poem, bring your own meaning to the words of this transcript, and then we'll share them on a Padlet, which I'll give everyone a second to, but the way this works is when you click on the words that you do not want to get blacked out. So I'll demonstrate here. If you're watching my screen, I'll say Brooklyn. Imagining the burned down, no, imagining the family. This is what I came for. That view. Brooklyn is home. Okay. Then you click blackout. And it'll black it out. You hit render full text and you get an image. And before we go to the next steps, I'll let everyone take a moment to create their own blackout poem. I've got one that I already made that's better than the one I just made that I'll pull up in just a moment while you all work. Reset it. That's an interesting, I got an interesting chat. I wonder. This is the poem that I made. All right, Charlie, can you share the Padlet link in the chat? So if you're teaching online, yeah, I will, Rena. If you're teaching online, this is, Padlet is something that you may be familiar with. Once you've completed your blackout poem, I'm gonna ask you to, you click render full text, and then you can right click on it and save image as, you know, whatever you want to name it. And then over here, you can drag and drop, or you can click this plus button on the bottom to drop your poem here. This way, we can share and we can see the different work that people have made. Oh, someone's a Padlet. Oh yeah, we got some Padlet natives here.
So Alex, can you hear?
Yeah, I'm
just to clarify, when we get the image, then we do a copy image.
Once you've rendered the image, render full text, you can right click on the image and hit save image as.
Okay, then we do save image as.
And just remember where you saved it and what you named it. And you could just drag and drop it onto the Padlet. If you like save it on your desktop, you could just drag it on there. Or Padlet has this little plus button on the bottom to create a post.
So can you do copy and paste right on there?
I don't know.
Let's try it.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Oh my God, so many people have theirs done already. You know, this is one of those things that we've done when we did it in a workshop. There were some people that did theirs very quickly, and then some people that really needed time. So I think the act of making blackout poetry, it's like, yeah, people approach this task differently. Oh, okay, so then you do plus, and then
it's great. I'm gonna just take a minute to read everyone's awesome poems here. So that's what I'm going to. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about the rest of the project, the rest of the website, and kind of how we wrap up.
I just also, as you're kind of doing this, can I just add, I'm just going to add a few things about this activity of doing blackout poetry is something that we have throughout our lessons. And the reason it's in there is to offer a new way of having students engage with this oral history as a text. And they can use that and the task can take many different forms. It can be totally creative where you're just using the words to express yourself, or to use the words to make a point, or to highlight the other person. right? So it's just another way to engage with the text, to go deeply into these words. And it, Alex, you're probably going to talk more about the art project that was done at the BHS, but I just wanted to throw that out there. These are really interesting and wonderful.
One thing I wanted to share, I know this, I don't know where this fits in between the activity and how we all listen to one another's, I say the excerpt. I think one thing that's also important, knowing that this is in the context of Muslims and immigrants, I think there's so much that's also like historically passed down from generations through oral tradition that I could speak to my experience. My parents are Bangladeshi American, and so I can say in my experience, not everything has been written down and documented. And I know this as I've tried to figure out my own like family history, and ancestry.com clearly isn't a solution for me per se. But all that to say is like, I think this is just phenomenal work that you guys are doing. So I just wanted to give kudos to you guys in sharing this like very delicate and precious ability to share someone's voice in a way that's, I say as a first generation Muslim, this is bringing tears to my eyes in a positive way. So thank you. Thank you for bringing this.
That is so nice to hear. We put a lot of work into this, and I think I want to debrief this a little bit, but I think what we really were trying to do, and I think the real challenge was, how do we make a curriculum called Muslims in Brooklyn that doesn't reify ideas about Muslims being separate and distinct? Like Muslims are not separate and distinct. That's why we've created this curriculum about them separately over here, right? And so for us, that's where lessons like these come from, where yes, this is an experience that resonates universally. We all connected with a different part of Ahmed Nasser's oral history when we read it, when we listened to it, and then when we interpreted it again and to make our blackout poems. That has very little, if not nothing, to do with his identity as a Muslim. And yet, he is a Muslim. And now his voice is being heard in your classroom, and it's being heard by your students. And I think that speaks to what Habiba was speaking about earlier about, that culturally relevant pedagogy. It's building this empathy, it's building this competency within us as listeners when we listen to these different voices. And if you're going to join us for the next two in this series, this is kind of our intro. The other ones do address the identity of Muslim much more directly. It still doesn't teach about Islam, but there are more oral histories that we've chosen, more clips that we've chosen that much more bring out people's cultural and ethnic identities in a different way that's much more forward than they are in this lesson. But I did want to just ask, if people could read the poems that other people have put up and just reflect on them. What are you noticing here? How is this different? What excites you about this? What questions do you still have? I'm curious to hear how people are processing this activity. Yes, I think at the end, Caitlin will share the links to the other events and some other events that the Center for Brooklyn History is holding. But reactions, thoughts. I'm seeing there's some. Susan and Charlie have left some in the chat there.
I kind of wanted to share this idea that I think a lot of just immigrants in general might have. I know my parents definitely felt this way as well. I think a lot of times when you come to the United States, it's so overwhelming as an immigrant, especially when you're considered the other. You're not an immigrant who necessarily finds a community quickly. I mean, I think New York, Muslims, Arabs, etc. Like, I think there is that community that exists. Whereas, like, if you immigrate to a different state or city or whatever, you don't find it. And one of the things that deeply resonated that Ahmed had said was about, I thought I would come here, make my money, and go back. This idea of the United States being such a temporary thing, so don't develop attachment. And I feel like that's a very, very like explicit and implicit type of teaching that happens in a lot of homes. I mean, my parents, like, I'm not a hypocrite, my parents definitely used to say things like that. They would be like, don't get it twisted, little girl, you're not an American, you're Lebanese in America. And hearing things like that as a child, I didn't know who I was anymore. So am I Lebanese Muslim? Am I American? Whatever that means, because the Americans didn't really fully accept us in a way, but then the Lebanese didn't accept us anymore in a way. And I think there's this, like, it's a lot of layers to unpack. And I think when you're working with ESL students, they feel this sense of, well, my parents want me to be this. I don't know what I want to be, who I am. And so you're seeing all of it kind of coming out in these really complicated and beautiful ways.
Thank you, Shireen. Did I say Shireen?
Yeah, thank you.
That was, thank you for that. You know, and I see that we are rapidly approaching the end of our time together. And so I wanted to just, you know, just based off of that comment alone here, let me share my screen. So in the future sessions, you know, we will be talking about, I hope the Blackout Poetry was awesome, that you loved it, that you find different ways to use it, that we can bring our interpretation to these voices, and that together we make we make something new, that we listen as a creative act, and that we bring something new and interpret this together. To your point, Shireen, when we go to our teacher toolbox here and look at these lessons, so speaking to the kind of design challenge of not reifying this idea of separate and other, the themes here we think fit in a lot of different curriculum areas. So we just did listening as a creative act, which we recommend to teachers. Just, this is what oral history is. This is what's valuable about it. This is what we can get from it. And then we have different themes that we think fit into a lot of different areas. So Linda Sarsour here is talking about growing up in Sunset Park and it being the best neighborhood in Brooklyn. So if you teach neighborhoods and you teach the second grade, it fits there, right? We have Eid and Ramadan in Brooklyn, people talking about different ways that they observe the holiday. To your point, growing up and fitting in, many of the oral histories, many of the narrators discuss their challenges growing up and fitting in. We're actually going to dive into this lesson because this is one of Habiba and I's absolute favorites because the oral histories are so resonant. Migration stories deals with issues of migration, both internal in the United States, moving from one place to another, but also immigrating from one nation to another. Belonging in Brooklyn deals with ways that neighborhoods can both include and exclude you and what forces those are. And then after 9/11, the political is personal is slightly different than the other lessons, but it takes us from Muslim experiences of 9/11. So Ahmad Nasser is there, all the way through to more recent, I think 2011, we have one of our narrators, Assad Dandia, was one of the plaintiffs in the NYPD spying case, where the NYPD was found to have engaged in domestic surveillance of Muslim communities across the tri-state area. And so it tracks the experience in 9/11 and it gives students, I think, a different perspective on the events. And it zooms out from just the day to kind of its lasting impacts. And finally, we have a blackout and collage poetry. So we did lesson that you can use with any of the transcripts. The blackout poetry is the one that we found is really simple to do. Well, not simple, it's logistically complicated to do online. Collage poetry is another way where we've cut up the transcripts and then pasted and rearranged the transcript to make, again, another interpretation or poetic interpretation of the transcripts. And we'll go through, you know, some of these more when we're in the other sessions. The website contains a ton of resources. It has a timeline. It has more scholarly articles for teachers who feel like they need or they want to have a little bit more intellectual background before approaching some of these topics, that they can find that are also good to sharing with, you know, upper school students who it might be appropriate for. And many other things that I don't want to say more because I do not want to be respectful of everyone's time. But the website, muslims.brooklynhistory.org, in the teacher toolbox and in the timeline, lots of things to discover, but many voices there that I think are worth listening to, and they're great. I think that brings us to the end of the official. Then I think I'm tossing it back to Caitlin. Yeah.
Yep, you got it. Well, I want to thank you, Alex and Habiba, so much for putting together this phenomenal program for us, for giving us such useful tools that we can implement right away in our classrooms. I'm going to share my screen just to show you a few details about our upcoming workshops. So again, if you enjoyed today and you want to receive some additional ideas for engaging with these topics with oral history in your classroom, we hope that you'll join us in less than a month on December 9th for Growing Up and Fitting In, and again on Wednesday, January 27th for Perspectives on Policing. And you can actually register for those now. Those registrations are open, so please do feel free to do that and spread the word. We would love to have as many educators as possible join us. We also have some other workshops coming up, so I'm going to highlight that too. We have a workshop coming up about New York City History Day. So New York City History Day is a wonderful way to virtually support project-based learning and research in your classrooms. So we would like to have you consider asking your students to participate in this year's New York City History Day competition. The Center for Brooklyn History is the proud host of the virtual contest, and we're partnering with cultural institutions around the city and the state to support New York City students and educators who are interested in participating in the nation's biggest History Day competition. And of course, the content that you all have been exposed to today would be a wonderful choice to explore in having your students put together a project. So the contest is free. It's open to all 6th through 12th grade students. And again, you can join us on December 2nd for a quick session to learn more about New York City History Day. We also have a session called Putting Brooklyn on the Map, which is scheduled for February 1st. This will showcase CBH's new digital map portal and virtual lessons you can do with your students that highlight the historic Black community of Weeksville and more. So stay tuned for that one too, a great accompaniment to Black History Month. All right, so now I wanted to encourage you all to please fill out our brief evaluation survey about your experience, especially since we're hosting this event 2 more times, well, different iterations, but on the same topics with Alex and Habiba. Your comments and your feedback will directly impact the way that we offer the next 2 events. And you can even comment on seeing my child, because we know that's a really cute feature as well. So if you enjoyed that, I'm sure we can bring it back for iterations 2 and 3. The survey is also your key to CTLE credit. So those seeking credit will receive the option at the end of the survey to enter your details for this purpose. And then Charlie will forward you those CTLE forms within the week if you've selected to receive it. Okay. So on behalf of Brooklyn Public Library Center for Brooklyn History and our fantastic speakers, I would like to thank you all so much for attending, and we hope that that we get to see you soon next month. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you all for your
Thank you.
incredible participation. That made it worth it. I'll rock. Come back.
Please come back.
Please, please. I guess like if people want to hang out too, they can hang out too.
Yeah, sure. If you have
Yeah.
any questions or comments too, if you want to talk about it.
I do have to, I'm getting hungry, right? It's like dinner time.
Guys, thank you so very much. This was really, yeah, I have so many thoughts. I don't even know how to express it.